Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. We're going to wait a couple minutes as folks filter in, and we'll get started shortly. Hello, Las Vegas. As folks are joining, I'm going to throw up a little poll just to see kind of the mix of our audience here. So if you wouldn't mind letting us know kind of what areas generally you work in, that'll help me and Roman tailor our content today. We're going to get started in about another minute or so. We just want to make sure everyone has time to join in our hectic and online lives and world these days. I've got a comment here that someone's not hearing any audio. I know we just tested this a moment ago, but if anyone can confirm that they're not hearing us, I don't know how you would do that if you can't hear us, but that'd be great. And if you can hear us, maybe let us know that as well. It may be an issue on just that one person's side.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine, Chris.
Okay. Perfect. That helps.
On my end.
So yeah, so whoever said no audio, maybe it might be a problem on your laptop or computer or whatever you're working on there. We're going to give it about 30 more seconds before we start, just to make sure everyone's joined. Feel free to answer the poll before we get going here. Thanks to everyone who let us know they can hear us. Appreciate that. Awesome. In just a few seconds here, I'm going to shut down the poll, and we'll jump in to the meat of the content here. One note, PacketFabric is going to be giving away, I believe it's a $100 gift card to one lucky viewer of the webinar. If you stay with us through the whole thing, the drawing won't be on the webinar; it'll be afterwards. But some lucky viewer will get an award today. It looks like some folks are commenting that the video comes up muted when you first open, and you have to manually hit the mic button in the lower left to unmute it. So that may be anybody who didn't have audio. It might just be muted. Again, if it's muted, I don't know how you're going to hear me say that. Maybe it's helpful, maybe not. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Appreciate everyone who answered the poll. Looks like we've got a pretty even mix here of folks across network operations, network engineering, network architecture, some in the DevOps and SRE world. We've even got a couple developers with us, and then a few folks who are kind of more on the management side and leading teams in those areas. So that's great to know. Today, obviously, we're talking about simplifying multi-cloud infrastructure automation using Terraform and PacketFabric. And, obviously the heart of this, since we're talking about PacketFabric and we're talking about multi-cloud automation, network as a service is a big tenet here that we want to kind of make sure everyone understands before we dive into who PacketFabric is and why this is interesting. And then obviously we'll get to a demo of the actual Terraform provider that PacketFabric is now offering in just a second here. But, I want to start the story, I guess, with digitization. And this is obviously something that everyone here is going to be familiar with and has been talking about for some number of years now, whether we call it digital transformation or digitization or the famous quote, "The software is eating the world." What we're really talking about here is, in a lot of ways, this shift from ownership to access. So if you look at some of the most successful digital companies out there, Uber, Lyft are some of the ones in the car space. And you've seen this kind of shift from, okay, instead of having to, maybe own a car over time, maybe you can get away, at least if you're in a big enough city with enough drivers nearby, with getting access to cars. And we've seen this play out in many, many industries. And a little bit what we're going to talk about today with network as a service is that shift from ownership to access in networking as well. And another big piece, I think, of digitization that's worth understanding and thinking about a little bit here is augmentation, right? There are a lot of folks who have worried a lot of the time about, the robots coming to take our jobs. And what we've seen over and over again is that a lot of times automation actually becomes augmentation, right? So you look at, I think Amazon's a really good example in particular where, they went from, some, number of thousands of robots in their factories and tens of thousands of employees. And as they've raised the number of robots in their factory, in their warehouses, they've actually massively increased the number of employees as well, because being able to put these robots into the warehouses has allowed greater efficiency, tighter use of space. And so they actually need more humans there to work around that. And that's happened again in lots of different areas, right? We look at even something as simple as autopilot on planes, self-driving in some cars that's starting to come out. It's really not necessarily replacing folks. It's augmenting them and making our jobs easier and also freeing us up to do higher level work. And again, I think that's something that network as a service can do, as we'll dive into a little bit more. And another big piece, I think, of digitization is agility, right? Agility, specifically business agility, and understanding how to respond to and work with customers and employees and partners in a much more agile fashion and much more flexible fashion, so that folks can kind of meet you where they are and use services kind of as and when and how they want. An ancient, at this point, example of this is the automated teller machine, right? So ATMs were another example where using digital technology, banks were able to put these ATMs out in the world where people could get access to cash. Interestingly, the number of tellers at banks has actually gone up. Again, so talking about that augmentation thing, because what happened is it made it cheaper for banks to open more branches. And the tellers now are doing more interesting work. Instead of just counting out dollars all day, they're actually there handling more interesting challenges for their customers. So again, I think, that umbrella of digitization, whether we want to call it digital transformation or whatever, is I think a good backdrop when we start thinking about network as a service. And then beyond digitization, I think even more importantly, it's a good idea to get our heads wrapped around this idea of deperimeterization. Another way to think of this is behind the firewall or beyond the firewall, right? Deperimeterization is kind of a big multisyllabic word, but really what we're talking about is the fact that back in the day, a corporate environment was fairly simple from both a physical and kind of network perspective. So think of an office maybe in the 80s or 90s where you maybe put some servers in a closet and you connected that up through some switches to PCs on everybody's desk, and you put a firewall on the internet connection. That network was secure. At the end of the day, you lock the door, the whole thing's locked up. It's inside of this kind of castle or fortress or whatever you want to call it, which is your office. And all of your local applications that your business needs to run are on that local network, whether they're on servers in the closet or on the individual PCs. And that was kind of it, right? What we've done over the last 20, 30 years is move beyond that model where more and more we're using cloud applications. And whether that's infrastructure as a service or software as a service or function as a service or on and on and on in this as a service economy and these cloud-based services, what we find is we are now using third-party offered applications run as a service outside of our network, outside of our corporate office for our business, right? And this is both the applications that run our business, right? So things like email, like very few people have an email server in their office or even in a co-location space at a data center anymore, right? We're using some kind of, whether it's Gmail or Microsoft or some other email service that's out there, right? Outside, beyond the firewall. And this goes for messaging, this goes for even ERP and kind of on down the list. You can think of pretty much any application that your business uses. In a lot of cases today, it's out as a SaaS in the cloud, or probably will be at some point in the not too distant future. And this also goes for the applications that our own businesses are building and writing. Again, we may be used to do development on local servers. Then we moved those to co-location facilities or data centers, and now we've moved that in a large scale to the cloud. Not everyone has yet. There's still, over half of us still have applications kind of running, quote unquote, behind the firewall in our own networks, in our own data centers, or even in our own offices. But more and more applications are born in the cloud or are migrated to the cloud. Again, whether they're IT applications that we're using to empower our employees, or they're the applications that actually allow us to connect with our customers and partners and folks out in the world. So, again, what this means is there's a lot of implications, right? There's obviously security implications, but there's also network implications where this, I can't just build this corporate LAN inside my campus anymore and expect that to be the whole thing and not really have to worry about the WAN, right? The internet connection has now become an integral part of my network because I'm reaching out to whether it's Salesforce or Slack or AWS, GCP, Azure, all of that stuff is available over the internet, which now makes this kind of best effort network run by other folks a critical part of my infrastructure. And so what's interesting here is that networking hasn't become any less important. In fact, it's in some cases become more important, right? If the network is down, in many cases, your business is down. Networking is still that fundamental layer that everything else runs on top of. And so network connectivity needs to be reliable. And that has led for a long time to networks not being very agile, right? Especially on the WAN side, right? If you think back, and I don't know, how many of the folks who are in network operations or network engineering, or maybe the folks who are in management now who used to be, or folks who have traversed over, if you have any experience working with, telephone companies, cable companies, big carriers, lead times to turn up a new circuit for a new office or a new data center often are 30, 60, 90, 120 days, right? You might have to wait 4 months to get these circuit turned up. That's not very agile, right? And then of course, if you want to use it for a little bit and turn it back down, that becomes a whole hassle because you've probably had to sign a 3 or 5 year contract to make this whole thing work. And so all of this gets a little bit tougher, right? And we need to change that. The network needs to be as agile as all of these cloud applications that we're building and that we're using. Another piece, I want to kind of jump a little bit to an analogy in transportation, because I think moving bits around the world is a lot like moving people or goods around the world. And if you think back to automotive history, the very first folks who bought cars, automobiles, horseless carriages at first, you really had to be a mechanic in order to drive the car, right? It was probably going to break down quite a bit. It wasn't very reliable yet. The technology was new. If you bought a car, if you owned a car, you either had to be wealthy enough to have your own mechanic who would kind of follow you along, or be a mechanic yourself and actually work on the car yourself. And then over the years, we made cars more and more reliable. A lot of that was by building in automation and by building in digitization, computers, computer control systems, making cars more automatic. And on the one hand, it reduced the need to be a mechanic in order to drive your own car around. But on the other hand, it also demanded that you couldn't in some ways, right? Because this automation now becomes a little bit opaque in some ways. And so you need more skilled or more specialized skills in order to work on these cars and things. And then, a lot of us believe that the potential future here is to go all the way to self-driving cars and have that just totally taken away, and maybe even use car as a service in some cases, right? If you have potentially Uber, Lyft, or one of the other services that has self-driving cars, and they just come pick you up and drop you off, again, moving away from ownership to access and just being able to use that resource and not having to be a specialist in cars in order to have transportation happen, right? If you want to move goods around the world, if you want to move yourself around the world, again, you don't have to be an expert in that thing anymore. You can specialize in what you're really good at, what you're passionate about. And I think that brings us to really kind of what NAS is, right? Network as a service. Obviously, the as a service part clues us into the fact that NAS really makes networks like a cloud. The idea there, right, is it's on demand. You need to be, build for what you're using only. You need to be able to turn it up, turn it down, and essentially it's self-driving. Now, there are people who work at PacketFabric who are making this work, but just like there's people at AWS or people at Salesforce and you can consume these services and allow them to kind of specialize in the WAN networking. They built the optical network, they built the Ethernet fabric, they built the API, they built the portal, they operate all of that together so you can consume it as a service, and it looks a lot like a self-driving network. Maybe it's a little bit of a mechanical Turk, but I think that's how as a service works today, right? Is that there's people in the application that make it work for you. And so that allows you to have this network that you can access and control through an API, through a portal, and as we'll see today, through a Terraform provider. So with that, I kind of want to shift to talk a little bit more about PacketFabric and the NAS they built. Obviously, I'm here with Roman from PacketFabric, and I just realized we didn't even introduce ourselves at the beginning. So maybe we'll pause for a second. And Roman, I know you're a technical product manager working at PacketFabric. Do you want to give us a little bit more of the rundown of who you are?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I've been in the networking business for quite a while, starting to work initially for Alcatel-Lucent. If you're not familiar with Alcatel-Lucent, it was acquired by Nokia back in 2016. I did support, and I eventually moved from France to the US to work with like major carrier providers in US, AT&T, T-Mobile, name it. And then eventually I end up changing role and joining a product management team, a company called F5, if you're familiar with it. And I really fell in love with product management, and here I am working now for PacketFabric, and very, very happy to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Roman. And myself, obviously, I have some thoughts and opinions on networking and network operations and automation and network as a service. I cut my teeth building networks around the turn of the century, and have since moved from there. I've done a lot of technology evangelism. I've traveled around the world speaking. I've written some patents. I've written some books, and we can jump past that. I want to pause for 1 second and see if anybody has any questions on network as a service generally, or anything that's kind of been said so far, before we dive into kind of who PacketFabric is, and talk a little bit more about the NAS that they built specifically before we move on to automation and Terraform.
Hey, Chris,
feel free to drop those questions in. Go ahead, Roman.
Yeah, sorry, I just something happened with my browser. Do you want me to share the one slide?
No, I think that's fine. I think what we should do is jump into kind of the NAS that PacketFabric built, and talk a little bit about specifically, not just NAS in general, but more specifically about PacketFabric's network as a service.
Yeah, definitely. So PacketFabric, there is really. So I'm just showing the slide there. So we build essentially a massively scalable private network. It's an optical network. We're not talking about a set of VPNs, or like an overlay, of different links. So as you can see on the screen, we are mainly North America, Europe. We do have one POP in Sydney. And what's really unique with us is we essentially build our own software stack on top of the platform we have, which make us very agile. And the software stack offer different ways to access our services. Chris mentioned, we have a portal, which is we're going to see in the demo after this, but also APIs, and more recently the Terraform provider we built. So on top of this massive network we built over the years, we also offer connectivity to the cloud, right? As Chris mentioned earlier, we offer connectivity to the clouds, to the major service public cloud, Google, AWS, and so on. But not only. I mean, we also connect with a lot of different partners. You can see there's a lot of logos here. Everybody knows Salesforce. There's other ones. And we have something actually pretty cool in our platform where you can become a customer and connect to our platform, and then from there you can essentially offer your services to other customers on the fabric, and we call that a marketplace. So make it very easy and fast to essentially offer a private, secure, and fast network connectivity to your customer. And that's
really interesting. And I think, as you said early on here, right, building your own network, I think, is a big part of this. From my perspective, a good NAS needs at least 3 things, right? So one, obviously, it needs to be as a service. And there's a big difference there between managed service and as a service. as a service is all about clicking a button and getting stuff to work, fairly automatically, fairly instantaneously, fairly real time. Whereas managed service usually requires, calling someone, waiting for manual intervention to happen. That's a big deal. Automation is obviously another big piece of this, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a second. But I think, in order to have that on-demand, real-time responsiveness to what customers need in the network, you've got to have automation. But then the other thing is the capacity, right? So if you're building your network over the top of somebody else's physical links, you're building, VPN tunnels, or you're leasing the network as you go, there's going to be lead times involved for here and there. Whereas I think what's really interesting about PacketFabric is it was built from the ground up as a NAS, and with massive capacity, and not just massive capacity, but also redundancy, right? There's path redundancy in resiliency built into the optical network below that Ethernet fabric. So really cool.
Yeah, and just to add on that, Chris, something also, which is really cool with the NAS and our platform is you can essentially spin up a service for like few hours and then tear it down, or like, maybe a month and then tear it down. So you're not locked into a contract, right? Of course, you can get a 12 months or more and then get a discount, on the price, but you don't have to, right? You can just use that service just for when you need, essentially, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Roman, I think we talked about in getting ready for this webinar a couple of really interesting use cases of being able to leverage that ability of PacketFabric. Do you want to mention a couple of those?
Yeah. One of them was actually very cool. It was so we work with SATA. If you're not familiar, is one of the big partner from Google, and essentially they had one of the customer who needed to transfer like a massive amount of data from somewhere to Google, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about like 30 petabytes, and I actually had to look at what was a petabyte. Petabyte is 1,000, tetrabyte, and 1 terabyte is 1,000 gigabyte. I mean, it's huge, right? It's hard to conceptualize in your head. And essentially, what happened is like they use PacketFabric to transfer the data, and that saves them essentially money, but not only money, time. Like, because I don't know if all of you are aware, but the public cloud, they charge egress, they charge for the egress, right? The data coming, out. And eventually, that translated into, I think, 1.4 million in terms of cost. And it would have take over a year. I mean, actually a year to transfer the data. But when they partner with PacketFabric and eventually use us to transfer that data, the migration, and it costs like half the price and it took half the time. So they saved like half the year just to transfer the data. So I found that example was pretty cool, and they were not locked for 12 months, right? They did that transfer for the 5 months it took, and then it was done.
Exactly. Yeah. Build big capacity for the 5 months you need to transfer the 30 petabytes, and then turn it back down with no questions asked. And again, all kind of maybe not quite at the click of a button when you're dealing with that kind of size, but really fast, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then the other one was that we had talked about recently anyway, was I think video studios, right? Something about, I know we've transitioned, not to go too far on a tangent, but I think it's really cool that a lot of the video production studios have transferred from green screens to actually using big, massive LED walls that show video while they're recording the person in front of the video. And obviously that needs quite a bit of bandwidth, and you don't want to be tied to a single location, because I think these things move around as well.
Yeah, you're right. And essentially what happened is kind of the same idea where, this huge amount of data before. We partner with a company called Orbital Studio, and they essentially essentially help with the setup of those big LED, panel, replaces the green screen, as you said. And the whole idea with using PacketFabric along with it was to establish a link from the stage where they actually record the footage, and send that over to wherever they need to be, right? And before, you have to think like it used to be like, all right, let me transfer that data on a hard drive and let me drive to the nearby village wherever I am to transfer the data from there. And it could take like hours or days just to do that transfer, and then having essentially a pop on stage allow them now to transfer directly the footage where it needs to be processed, post-processed after the fact. And then, again, saving time, and we're going to see more and more that type of technology in the Hollywood, in Hollywood, right? Using that as a
and I'm still amazed. I mean, I still bump into kind of in some of the consulting I do, I still bump into industries and companies that are absolutely filling station wagons or vans or trucks with hard drives and driving them around to get around some of these issues. So, it's interesting that, I think I always hasten back to that William Gibson quote that the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And I think PacketFabric and NAS are part of that wave where there's, some really interesting possibilities for business agility that not everyone has quite sussed out yet. So that's interesting. And I think, that's a good point to kind of take us to the next idea, which is obviously, as I mentioned, PacketFabric wouldn't work without a great deal of automation, right? I mean, there's the concept of SDN is built into this. It's obviously built as a software stack, as you said, that kind of builds up to this API that runs the whole network. Inside of that whole system, there's a lot of automation to make sure that everything happens and can be provisioned and deprovisioned as needed. But obviously, we don't want automation just to stop with our WAN network service, the NAS that we're purchasing or using. We want to automate our own networks. And so for that reason, PacketFabric was built obviously from the ground up with this RESTful API. There's a portal above it, so you can log in and do things in the portal if you want by hand. But the portal uses the same API that's exposed to all customers to be able to kind of programmatically interface with PacketFabric. And so if you're doing any kind of automation inside of your own network, you can obviously connect that also with your WAN through the NAS, which I think is really, really cool. And we've now recently seen that PacketFabric released a Terraform provider. I know we're going to get into a demo here, Roman. Maybe first you want to just tell us what is Terraform and what's a Terraform provider, and then we can kind of look at the how that actually works with PacketFabric now.
Yeah, so Terraform, for those who are not familiar with it, it's a very, very, very popular infrastructure as code tool used by the DevOps and the SRE community, but not only, right? Enables you to manage a set of resources using what we call providers, and it helps you to safely predictably create, modify, and update your infrastructure, essentially, right? So here I'm showing you this diagram to show you where that fits. So here on the top left, there is you, right? Who needs to spin up services, manage your infrastructure, and then Terraform fits between essentially you and the service you want to configure. So on the right side of the screen, we've got PacketFabric, right? We've got our NAS, but not only, right? You could also have, like AWS has their own provider. Like there is over 1,000 or more providers, Terraform offers, which offer a consistent way to configure infrastructure across, your infrastructure, right? It's not just PacketFabric; it's also like Google Azure and so on, right? So the way it goes, and you're gonna see in the demo, this is what we're gonna do here together is the first things you need to do is to write your code, right? Because Terraform has a language called HCL. It's very easy to read, very easy to learn. I personally learned it in like a month myself. I wasn't very familiar with Terraform, 6 months ago. So very quick and easy to pick up. And so you write what you want in a flat file, and then store that flat file on a Git, for example, on a GitHub, which essentially it's a service to store your code, right, and version your code, owned by Microsoft. And then from there, execute that code to create all the different elements, in the PacketFabric platform, but also in other platform, right? And you can also run Terraform locally in your laptop. You don't have to run it, and store it on the GitHub whatsoever. You can also play around and get started, on your laptop. Just run the Terraform. It's a small software you can install on your laptop and run with it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I want to rewind just a second, Roman. Just for folks who are totally new to Terraform, this idea of a provider. I mean, obviously, this diagram is great. I think you laid it out well where it fits in this architecture. But I want to dive, just a little bit, another layer deeper, just in case people don't know what a provider does. I think this was something that when I was first introduced to Terraform, confused me for a while. And essentially, let me say it, and then you tell me where I got it wrong. Essentially, the provider is, when PacketFabric offers this provider, that provider is a collection of, tools that interface with PacketFabric's APIs, so that when you're building automation, you have a consistent interface to the provider, and PacketFabric is handling on the back end any changes in APIs, any changes that go on. Now, obviously, insert PacketFabric could be replaced with, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud, Azure, whatever, anything you're using there. But that's kind of what the provider does, right? It's kind of an interface between, the actual, system you want to interact with, APIs, and then those flat files and code you're writing. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, you got it exactly right. Earlier you mentioned, our web portal uses our APIs. Well, it's the same thing, right? We're not redesign. We didn't create a whole set of new API for Terraform. We use the same set of APIs our platform provide, and then Terraform comes above it and interface with the APIs. And you mentioned something which is really really cool actually about Terraform is API change. The whole goal is to update the provider. So the user experience doesn't change, right? The Terraform provider kind of adapt the change based, with the API change, for example. So that make it easy and consistent, right, across the board.
Awesome. Well, let's maybe take a look at how this works in practice.
Cool. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen.
And as things are going here, obviously we're doing a live demo, so there'll be a couple pauses here and there, folks. Feel free to drop questions in about anything we've covered so far or what you're seeing on the screen as we go. I'd love to keep this, even more interactive than we have been so far. So dump those questions in.
Awesome. So I'm going to show you a few screens here for the demo. Here it is a PacketFabric portal we talk about, and we'll get back to it. But let me just show you kind of the state where we are and the windows, explain which windows are what. So here is a PacketFabric portal. Here I've got my my Google Cloud, where you can see I've got my one VPC default, and we're going to create a new one together. And then here is my Git repository I created for this demo, which essentially has one folder. And in that one folder doesn't have much, so we're going to add to it. And we'll get that in a minute. And then finally, like I said, you could execute your Terraform code either locally on a laptop, or you can execute it, remote, right? And what we're going to do in the demo, we're going to execute it not on my laptop, but using a Terraform Cloud. So Terraform Cloud, it's essentially a service to run your Terraform code for you. So you don't have to run it locally on a laptop. Make it easy to collaborate with other people. And what's really cool with Terraform Cloud, and you don't have to use Terraform Cloud, you could use, just GitHub Action, GitLab runners, Jenkins. There is so many CI/CD, tools out there. But I picked this one because it's very visual and easy to understand. And here, what's cool with Terraform Cloud is you can essentially create what they call a workspace, and then add your GitHub repo to that workspace. You can see here's a link. I can open it. It's the same as this one. But essentially, what happened is, like, when you update the Git and the Git repo, which essentially this is where you store your code, right? You will trigger action in the Terraform Cloud, and you'll see that in the demo. So let's get started. So I've got this VS Code. It's just an ID, right? You can use whatever you want, but I love VS Code because it has the console embedded, and it's easy to navigate and so on. So here I've got different folders, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to first create the Google VPC and then the PacketFabric Cloud Router. And just to show you, I'm not going to go and show you in detail all the code because it's got a few lines, but I just want to show you this one, for example, because it's very simple how to create a cloud router using PacketFabric Terraform Provider. So Terraform has like two things mainly, right? It's got resources and data sources. Resources are meant to create, objects into the, components into the the service, the provider you specified, and then data sources are used to retrieve information from the platform. So here, what we are doing here, we are using the PacketFabric Cloud Router resource and create this cloud router with all different parameters, and we separate the variables with the code. It's good practice, and output is just to show the output.
So this is what HCL looks like. And as you said, you're using best practice here by using these variables. You've got these variables defined in some other HCL flat files as well.
Yeah, so we have this Terraform, the variables actually are located here. You can see where each variables are defined here, and you can set a default one, put a description so everybody understands what they are, and you can also change them, right? So let's go and move those files into my webinar folder. So I will commit those change, and you can see here I've got this terminal, and if I do a git status, so I use git, which is a tool, another tool. It's an open source tool, to help version your files, and using git you can upload your files to a Git repository. So in that case, GitHub. And you can see here we've got those 3 files. So I'll add them to the to the list of files I'm gonna commit, which essentially commit the file will basically tell Git, all right, I'm ready to go, and I'm gonna go ahead and push those files on the GitHub. I just do the commit. You can add a message here, create PacketFabric Cloud Router and Google VPC, and then the push will go ahead and deploy those changes, right? So super easy, just three Git commands, and for those who are not familiar with Git, super easy to learn. There is tons of resources on the web, but those are like the basic steps, right? Git add to add your file, Git commit to commit your change, and then push.
Yeah, and then this is working again because, as you said, this Git repository is tied to the Terraform cloud, which
yes.
Instead of that, it could be whatever your CI/CD pipeline is. If you're already doing this kind of work in other parts of your application or network, obviously it could be anything here, but that's what's happening here. It's when the Terraform cloud, which is basically your CI/CD pipeline in this case, is picking up those changes from Git and then making stuff happen.
Yep. Exactly, and you can see here on the Terraform Cloud web interface, it's kind of nice. You can have a view of what you tell him to create, and the way Terraform works, you have kind of 2 different ways, right? You have the first steps, different steps. First steps we call plan, right? Terraform plan, which will show you what the HCL code contains. Without actually creating all the different objects, so you can review. So here, for example, we can see we've got 4 different things here. I've got my VPC, my cloud router here. You can see we're going to create a cloud router with 2 gig capacity right there. And then I use random pet names just to use a random value to name the different things in the cloud. And something here I also want to mention. Right now I have to confirm. You see manually here to say go, but you could also set up Terraform Cloud to apply the change automatically, right? So I talk about the 2 steps. First step, plan. Second step, apply. And apply will actually go read. So Terraform will read all the different resources laid out in the config and translate that into the API of the provider. So here, Google and PacketFabric, right? And you can follow on the screen what's going on there.
That's great. And so, for example, the fact that the cloud router is 2 gigabits per second, that's a variable from the cloud router configuration file.
Exactly. Correct. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So let's go and then check if things happen correctly. So first, I'm gonna refresh my Git repo, and you can see I've got my 2 files. Here, if I refresh my VPCs. And I'll go ahead and I see, this VPC. So the random pet Terraform resource actually create a random name. It's a bird name, and you can see poetic monarch. That's what we got today. But you can name whatever you like. And then on the PacketFabric, if I navigate under the cloud router, here we've got our poetic monarch created there of 2 gig. So step 1. Step 2, let's go ahead and create the cloud router connection, which essentially will create the link between the PacketFabric platform and the Google Cloud.
Okay, so what we've done now, I mean, and just to restate again, this is a new VPC that just got set up in Google Cloud, and then you've added a cloud router to it, which is great, but obviously not connected to anything, so it doesn't do anything quite yet.
Correct. Right now, when we just created kind of maybe something you would already have created, you already have your VPC, right? You're not going to create a new one. And the cloud router, is something, you could also create initially, but then it doesn't do anything correct. Yeah. All right, let's go back to the VS Code, and here I'm going to add a few more things. I've got 4 files. So I'm just gonna select them and put them in the in the root folder. And here, what we're doing here, we're using the Google provider, which to create the different steps to do in Google to create that partner connection between Google and PacketFabric, and as well as the PacketFabric Cloud Router connection, which will actually also create the connection. So you really have the 2 sides, of the you have to configure, you have to do stuff on both sides, right? On Google and PacketFabric, and that's where using Terraform is really cool, because you can use both providers to set up those 2 different sides together in the order of steps you need. It needs to be right. So I'll go and add those 2 files. And push. See, very easy. And then we can go to the Terraform cloud and go back to the runs, and you can see it just popped up here. So that's very nice with integration. Terraform cloud has done, monitoring the GitHub change, and then automatically creating that run for us. So the plan tells us what to do, and you can see here 31 resource to create. And trust me, doing that manually, it's like to take your analogy, Chris, it's like going back on the with your horse and take the dirt road to go somewhere. It takes a little longer time. You get there, but it'll take a little longer time. So I'm gonna go ahead and confirm, and we can follow the different steps.
So while that's running, Roman, I mean, obviously the Git commands are super simple, but that relies on that little bit of code that's in those flat files. That's already, for the demo here, we've already got that written. Obviously, that's a big step in this process, is actually writing those out. I assume there's documentation from PacketFabric on how to use the provider. And what variables you are available to you, and how to configure those actual files themselves.
Yeah, it's a good point there. So so we have actually documentation. If you go on the Terraform registry, which hosts all the different providers available for Terraform, you can navigate under the documentation tab. And this is where we list all the resources. And then for each resource, we give you a link to the PacketFabric documentation, which is really awesome and very cool. You can, if you need more information on how things work, definitely hit the doc. And then an example usage right there on the screen. So that's one place. And the other place, Chris, which is also which is also really cool, is we created what we call use cases, which is located on the GitHub itself. So if you go on the GitHub where the Terraform code is hosted, and you go under the example folder, we have a use cases folder where what I'm doing today for the demo, I have it here. So
awesome.
So so you can see here, I've got that diagram explaining what it is, and then the example of code right there you can use and leverage.
Very cool.
Yeah. So right now we can go ahead and look at the creation. You can see here things are happening quite fast. If I go under the VPC, the Google Cloud platform, the partner connections is under interconnect. And then under interconnect, you can see here we've got this interconnect VLAN attachment created there. We created a 1 gig link to Google. And we also have a cloud router, which is used because you need to connect the interconnect with a VPC, right? So the cloud router is used for that. Google make it fairly simple. I can tell you from experience at AWS, it's a little more complex because you have more gateways to create, and there's a little more object involved to make that partner connection working. But again, Terraform make it super easy because you lay that down, in your flat file, and then you fire and forget almost, right? Yeah. And then here, just to show, we've got that connection created on the platform, on the PacketFabric platform. And you can see here, we use a point of presence LAX, which is on the East Coast. On the West Coast, my bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so that can take a little time.
What about authentication? I mean, obviously we want all of this to be happening securely. I don't want other people to be able to reach into my Google Cloud instance or my PacketFabric instance and make changes. How are you handling authentication here?
Yeah, good question here. So, okay, apply finished. So yeah, for authentication, what happened is it will vary depending on what CI/CD pipeline you use. But for Terraform Cloud, they have, and all of them have similar things, right? GitHub Action also has that. You can set up variables within the CI/CD pipeline, and this is where you would actually store the API key, the PacketFabric API key, which is used to authenticate to to PacketFabric software, so the platform. And for Google, it's the same thing. You would put the project ID and also the credential, which is essentially a service account. We use to interact with the API, Google API. And you see here, it's a sensitive, variables, which doesn't show on the screen and stored there and secure, nobody can access. So this is where you set things up.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's our next step?
So yeah, next step, we're gonna wait this connection to come up. It'll take a little time. Let's just go ahead and create that other cloud router connection we have part of the demo, which is the IPsec one. So we offer many ways to we offer to connectivity to different platform, right? Like I mentioned, Google, Azure, AWS, and so on. But we also have an IPsec resource, which allows you to connect from PacketFabric to a router on-prem, over an IPsec, a VPN connection, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So here, what I'll do, I'll just add that third one. And I'll do the same thing. I'll go ahead and add the file, amend the change, and push. Here, I'm using IPsec, but you could also connect to our platform via a port directly on one of our router, and have essentially an interconnect with us. And then from there, you can also create a connection between that Google connection I created and that port. You could host on our platform. So you have different ways of connecting to your on-prem. You can either use an IPsec or just connect a port to our platform directly.
Yeah, and so just to kind of recap again the 3 steps you've taken here. You created the VPC and then added the cloud router to the VPC. Step 2 was connecting the VPC to the cloud router, essentially. So
yes, essentially, yeah.
You can actually use it. And then step 3 is let's now use that cloud router that's connected to this VPC and connect it to something outside of the VPC. And to your point, right, we're doing IPsec for this demo, but that could be a port into PacketFabric or really anything else potentially. I mean, really, whatever you've got, all the options for cloud router there.
Exactly. Yeah, it could be like a VPC in AWS or a virtual network in Azure. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I just confirm something also I want to mention. Right now I'm manually confirming the creation of the object, but you can also have it done automatically, right? You don't have to confirm all the time.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's refresh the page here, and we've got that green button here telling us a BGP session is established between PacketFabric and Google, which is really cool. There's a few more things to do. You can see the thing is spinning, and then that IPsec connection is also in progress. I actually don't have a real router, so it will never show green,
Right.
but it's just for the demo, right?
Good deal. Very, very cool. I see while you're looking at the portal here that there is this banner at the top there.
Oh, yeah.
You're launching a new portal. What's that all about? Can we take a look at it?
Yeah, definitely something very exciting. We are gonna release in very, very soon, and you can have a peek. If you are already a PacketFabric customer, we are redesigning our web portal, and I just click on the button. You can see here, few cool improvement with that new portal. You can already see like we use new kind of a more newer kind of front end, components. And then a few cool things here. We've added, a quick search. You can, quickly find things in the portal. Little things like, turn on the dark mode. We've had a lot of people, asking for that.
Always.
And, navigate around. We improved navigation and, user experience, generally speaking, on that new portal. And it's coming up very soon. So we'll love to get more feedback, if you are an existing PacketFabric customer.
Very slick. And obviously, as you said, we don't actually have a router to connect that IPsec tunnel to, so that's not going to finish. So that's it. Like everything kind of finished up and closed out there. That's great. Always good to have a successful demo when you're doing it live.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Nicely done. I do have one question here that maybe we can take real quick. Someone is asking about a map of North America where all the network services is. I know we had kind of a quick map up before. I don't know if that's something you have handy. Obviously, we were using a site in LAX today, but this gentleman's asking about, or woman is asking about the eastern coast of the U.S. Do you have more of a more comprehensive map we could go to? Is there one on the website or something we could pull up?
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Actually, let me go ahead and let's go on the website together. So if you go to PacketFabric and navigate under Network as a Service and then Location, and we've got all the POPs, the one which are coming soon, and the one we have already today. So you can see all the different things here. So we've got a lot of location on the East Coast, middle of the US as well, West Coast, and Europe quite a bit as well.
Very cool. Awesome. Yeah. So great. If there's any other questions, please feel free. We're about to get to the end here. As we wrap up, please, don't hesitate to shoot in your question before you lose your chance. I think, that's it for the demo. That's kind of it for my pontification. There's some resources here. Roman, you want to walk through these? And then as you're doing that, I want to note that there are some downloads attached to the webinar under I think it's under a resources tab that you can take a look at there. They should be in your port in the view of this webinar. There should be a resources bit that you can get to, and there's some downloads there. But why don't you walk us through what's on this slide here, Roman?
Yeah, so I put some links. Terraform, GitHub, for those who are not familiar with it. Terraform has actually a very cool, learn yourself. You don't even have to download anything. It's all on their portal. So just to learn that. And then to find the PacketFabric Terraform, super easy. You can either literally Google Terraform PacketFabric, and this is the first link, right? And also something I want to mention, as you use the Terraform provider, if you have any problem, any issue, any question, you can go on the GitHub and just create an issue, under the GitHub, and we'll be monitoring it.
Awesome. And I found the button. It's called attachments. So there should be attachments on the webinar here if you want to grab those. There's some info on the cloud router and some other papers there that might be interesting. So please feel free to download those before we close out. Also a reminder, all of you who have stayed with us for the whole presentation here are going to be eligible for this drawing of a $100 gift card. So watch for that. If you're the winner, obviously you'll want to be able to grab that. And then I've got a question here. I don't know, Roman, are we going to make these slides available, or in particular that resources slide for folks who were on the webinar?
Yeah, I think we can make that happen. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you don't mind dropping maybe your email, and we can.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, because the questions come in anonymous, so please do drop an email address if you want us to send you the slides. That'd be great. Oh, he put his name here, so we can take care of that. Well, awesome. Unless there's any other questions, kind of last minute, we'll hold on for 1 second here. But otherwise, hopefully this was informative. Hopefully now everyone kind of understands a little bit better about what network as a service is, why it's important, how it impacts business agility, what PacketFabric has done to build their network as a service, and then kind of most importantly here, how to use the Terraform provider to interact with your PacketFabric instance. I got a question here real quick, sharing the Git repo examples. I think all that is up on Git. Is that right, Roman?
Yeah, if you go under the, like I was showing earlier very briefly, if you go under the GitHub repo of the Terraform provider, you can find under the example folder a lot of examples there.
Awesome. So it's under PacketFabric, under the Terraform provider. Can you show us where to find that again? Just real quick, so folks can.
Yeah, let me just
have the link there.
So it would be under example and then use cases, and there is more than just the Google one I just showed you. There is AWS and some other ones right there.
Fantastic. All right, I've got a few email addresses here we'll send slides to. And again, everything else is kind of up there. There's a question here. How do you license your product? I don't know, Roman, if you can talk a little bit about, so obviously PacketFabric is providing network as a service. And so it's built on demand, but I don't know if you can go further than that. The Terraform stuff is all freely available, right? And it's just the use of the network is what would be a charge, obviously.
Yeah, essentially, and you can go and create an account just today. You don't have to, have any approval whatsoever. It's like creating an account on Google or AWS. We do have some quota, so eventually, if you need to create a lot of services, we're gonna have to unlock that quota. But you can go ahead and it's network as a service. You create as you need. There is no license or whatsoever. Yeah.
Awesome. And definitely feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, folks. There was an email address on that last slide, and also obviously you can go to the PacketFabric website and connect with someone. Anybody who left comments for follow up, we will follow up.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. I think that's it for today.
Thanks, everyone.